Welcome to the Intelligence Amplifiers, podcast that celebrates the people who make the intelligence a collective superpower. In every episode, we uncover the stories of learning and development leaders who amplify knowledge, break down silos, and empower teams to thrive. These are the enablers of insight, the ones turning expertise into action and shaping the future of work by ensuring that the right knowledge reaches the right people at the right time. So, if you're ready to explore how the intelligence is amplified and shared across organizations, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Intelligence Amplifiers. Today we're speaking with Philipp Krenn, Head of Developer Relations at Elastic. Hello, Philipp.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great to have you. I usually start from the beginning. I'm super curious how you got into developer relations. I believe you used to be a web developer at one point.
I studied and I did many things. I did web development. I did databases. I did kind of like at my last job, I was doing a lot of like DevOps, deployment, Jenkins, stuff like that. And I don't want to say I got bored, but at some point I was like, well, what else can I do? And then I started doing a lot of meetups in Vienna, where I'm originally from. And then I moved on to do conferences. And my company back then, which was a startup, they struck the deal. And I'm not sure they knew what they signed up for. They said, like, we are not going to pay, or we're not able to pay for your travel if you go anywhere to speak. But if you need the time, we'll just give you the time off. And I ended up doing, I think, 10 conferences in Europe. I was gone for a full month. So I spent a lot of time on other stuff. And we were like only 2 people on the pager, keeping our systems up and running. And at some point, I decided that maybe this is not the best fit anymore. And I also figured out while I was doing conferences that you could do conferences for a living, which didn't really occur to me before. And then Elastic had an open position and I applied and got it. And then I started doing a lot of conferences. After that, I did not do 10, but more like, 100 conferences or something like that a year. I did a ton of conferences up until COVID, but that's how I got into DevRel. I don't want to say I was bored as a developer, DevOps engineer, whatever you want to call it, but it was more like something that started on the side and that I enjoyed, and then I kind of like transitioned. And the funny thing is, sometimes people ask like, how long did you know, or how did you work towards that goal? For me, I'm always more, you will figure stuff out as you go along, because a year before I started that position, I didn't even know it existed. So I was very much more into like, oh, this is an opportunity and you can just take it and do something, rather than having a full plan, because they often don't work out anyway. At least that's my approach.
Got it. So there's this passion that you had for meetups and conferences, right? And it sounds like a community building almost, right? Like kind of bringing people together. What was that about the meetups or bringing people together and organizing these events that attracted you? Well,
yeah, I think it was learning about, like, I was back then, like, it was the NoSQL was the big hype topic back then. Or it was a very big topic. So there was a lot of excitement and some confusion. And I was just very curious and I wanted to learn. I also did like trainings on the side. So that community building and everything made a lot of sense. And I met some very interesting people on the way, and like interesting use cases that did help me for my job. It didn't really help the company so much, because we were more doing automated invoices and receipts and stuff like that. It was very B2B, but we still needed all the data stores. So for me, it was interesting, and it gave me an interesting perspective to do something outside of my regular work. And then the community building, of course, like Vienna is not exactly a huge tech hub. So it is relatively easy to build something, and then people, or the relatively small bubble there is, you start to get to know people and meet others and figure out what is there or how far can you take it. And that's kind of like how I got started. And then it was just good to get connected within Vienna and see who is there and what's going on. And I mean, there are some very good AI people nowadays in Vienna. So I think there is a specific bubble there again as well.
Got it. So it's a really curiosity and learning, right? Like that's kind of like, that was your passion and you started organizing these events. And through that you got connected and eventually got connected to early Elastic people, right? And I love the story how you sold them that Austria is very close to Germany.
Yeah, you need to be careful historically. That is a complicated combination, but yes, I met somebody at a meetup, and I thought it sounded very interesting. And then I saw that he posted a tweet at some point, like, we're looking for somebody to do conferences or DevRel for us. But they looked in Germany, I think mostly in Berlin. But I did convince them that Austria is close enough that I could travel if needed, and that would work out. Back then, we were also a pretty small, or Elastic was a pretty small company, so it was pretty flexible in hiring. And I was the first one in Austria, and I kind of like got my own country for a while. So yeah, we could just make things happen. And I mean, I was lucky, but I feel like you need to earn your luck to some degree. Like, you go to the meetups, you make the connections, you act on like seeing the tweet and everything, and then stuff can happen.
Got it. And I know what you do today is different, right? Like, you're head of the developer relations organization. We'll talk about that in a bit. But back to the early days in the DevRel role, what does that look like? Is that like being on the road a lot? Is it developing new uh, material, pitching, conferences, building hello world examples? What is the life of a early dev relations person look like? Advocate, I guess.
Yeah, I always loved building and speaking, so I built a ton of demos and talks, and I just travel a lot to show them. I feel like the time before COVID was also slightly different, like the number of conferences. I think we still haven't reached the same point yet. But like, you could just like, I had weeks where I did 4 events in a single week, like in different cities. Like, Europe is small enough, you can just like basically go from one place to the next. If that is the best way to spend your time, we could argue now, but back in the day, that was a common model, and you could just like reach a lot of people, talk to them, and you also would become like kind of like known for it. At some point, it got very easy because you get invited to events or people know you. Um, I figured out at some point, I don't want to wear funky stuff, but like Elastic had some very pink shirts, and whenever I did a talk, I wore a pink shirt, and then people knew me from like that I'm often wearing the pink shirt, and they would basically recognize me almost by my shirt. So it's like, you can build your reputation and you can build like the company brand and everything very easily. The one thing that I think is, or I feel strongly about this, is that if you're developer relations for a company, it's really more about the products than yourself. I don't love it when people make it more about themselves. For me, it's more like interesting technology and what you can do with it, rather than the person cult or whatever. I'm not a huge fan of that approach. Or like, I know that it's a big thing in DevRel, and then you have like very big egos and everything. That's something I'm not very big on, and we as a company also try not to do. Is like, you as a person, you bring your perspective and you're very important. But at the end of the day, it's really more about like the product that you can use and what you can do with it, and that's kind of like the end goal that you're trying to achieve.
Got it. Got it. And so that's a great observation. And I know on your website you also talk quite a bit about sort of like the behind the scenes of developer advocacy, and what's working, what's not working, even the naming, the titles. What's your opinion on the titles? What should we call the role?
I mean, naming is a fleeting thing. I mean, or I feel like DevRel has gone through a complicated time, especially like in the early 2020s, when like everybody, like the zero interest phenomenon, where everybody was hiring like crazy. Like, a lot of people who, at least for us, like our target audience is developers, like solving hard technical problems with the data store, or in observability or security. So it is a very technical role. I think part of what DevRel then shifted and often became a weird mix of marketing, or it was almost like this cargo culting, where people were like, big successful companies have DevRel. We need DevRel. We don't know what to do with DevRel. We don't know what they should be doing or do for us, but we should have DevRel. And then you created a weird ecosystem where it was not quite clear what the value was and how to do it right. And I think that like DevRel got much hotter again in the last 6 months, but before that, there were like 2 years or so where it was a bit tricky, or where DevRel went through a complicated phase where there were a lot of layoffs. So it was a reshifting of priorities, just because we had kind of like overshot on one side and then we tried to correct. Right now, there seems to be a lot of interest because developers, like with all the LLM tooling that you can use, developers are front and center in like leading that change right now. So convincing them to use your tools and showing what is possible and just educating everybody and spreading the word and having the interaction is again very valuable, but I feel like there were different phases, and that's why some people started calling it technical evangelism, or I'm not sure I love the term evangelism. It has like a too much convincing feeling rather than technical, because our definition is very technical. I want everybody on my team to go somewhere, and if somebody comes up with a laptop and says like, I have a broken cluster or a query that doesn't work, you will never be able to solve everything. But we should have a good idea of how to get started and fix that. Or like somebody says like, my cluster is slow or whatever, that we have a starting point to say like, let's look at these 5 things. Let's try to make it better. I actually love it when people don't just ask like easy or generic questions, but come up with a hard problem and then we can solve a hard problem. So that's kind of like the thing that I think is important. We can argue about the naming, but the important thing is that you have the technical firepower to earn your spot. And that is also how you earn your trust to build a community, because people know that you know and you can help them. And it's not just like repeating the marketing message, but that you can go deep and low if you have to.
Got it. So it's a very technical. It's technical education essentially. It's very technical in nature, and you got to know your stuff and explain it to people who are solving some really big problems. So I have a question. When I was at Twitter, I built Twitter University, which was the internal education for engineers. I also owned an open source for Twitter, and so we had developer relations people that would, like advocate for, or developer advocates that would advocate for our open source projects, of which we had many. But then there was the sort of the official Twitter API developer relations team, and even though we were doing exactly the same work, organizationally, we were as distant as it possibly could be. Essentially, my team rolled up to engineering and their team rolled up to sales, to revenue organization, right?
Oh, okay.
So you touched on this, like marketing message or so. I guess my long way of asking the question: where should developer relations sit?
I mean, we are right now in engineering, and that's where I think we should be. I have been at Elastic for so long. It is actually funny. I was hired in one position. By the time I started, the structure had already changed again. So I was hired in a dedicated DevRel team. And then my manager, who hired me back then, who is still at Elastic, he decided he wants to be an engineer again. And we broke up the team. So I joined like the infrastructure team, what it was called back then. So I was part of an engineering team. I was doing maybe 15% or so their work and 85% my DevRel conference, whatever work. And then we formed a so-called community team, and then went to marketing, where it was always weird because like marketing is all about like the pipeline and leads, and we don't really do pipeline and leads. So we were always like a bit odd, and they were always looking at us as like, how do you help our problems? You don't. Why are you here? What is your value? And then we moved back to engineering, which I think made a lot more sense. So I'm obviously biased here. I think it's also a bit of a different story. If Elasticsearch is an open source product, you can download it, you can run it for free, you can build it, you can contribute code. Maybe if you're like a SaaS only platform, it's a bit of a different story where you should sit and how your community forms and shapes. But I think if you are an open source product, engineering makes a lot of sense. Also because like we have like contribution programs where we try to encourage people to contribute code or like show how things are done. So I think like engineering and that connection makes a lot of sense. The other thing that what I always say, like what differentiates us from marketing or sales, I feel like marketing and sales is very much outgoing to get out the message, mostly marketing. DevRel is really more of a two-way street, ideally. There's like, yes, this is the position of the company. We will reframe it to make it work for developers if necessary. But it's also very much about the feedback of what is working and what is not working. And that's why it's good to be close to engineering, because we very often are like very early on in trying out pre-builds or in feature discussions, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what will be a problem, what is working, what is not working. We're doing hackathons, for example, where we collect a lot of feedback and then bring it back to the engineering organization and say like, this is working, this is great, this is not working yet. We need to iterate on that. So it's really more about like an eye-level conversation, I think. Whereas marketing is not really so much about the eye-level conversation. It's really more about the megaphone of the message that the company has set. So I think that's why DevRel in marketing is sometimes tricky. it's not the megaphone and it doesn't align so well with the lead and pipeline thing. That's why often marketing organizations have a very hard time dealing with DevRel.
Yeah, I see both. That's what I'm asking. I see and to your point, some
Well,
organizations.
it is pretty common, to be in marketing or like in. I think there are 3 or 4 structures, right? It could be engineering, it could be marketing, could be like office of the CTO where you're attached. Field or something like that, I think would be pretty complicated, at least for an open source product.
Yeah, that makes sense. And on your website, you talk about being user zero, right? Like kind of being that first team that actually kind of tests that. So I would imagine sitting in engineering, you're probably very close to the engineers. You're very close to the product. You have that intimacy, and you basically get to kind of essentially play with the early releases and build prototypes and demo code and things like that on top of it, right?
Yes, because we'll try it out. If we don't manage, our users probably will not manage. So then we need to fix stuff early on. I feel like we're the step 0 of the feedback loop, and then we go out to the community and bring back more feedback. But if I can't use it, if I don't understand it, or it doesn't make sense for me, it's probably hard to explain to my users as well, or have a compelling conversation about it. So I think you need to feel comfortable. And the other thing, by the way, in DevRel, your life is so much easier if the product is good, because I feel like that is the foundation almost that you work with.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm curious. So you started as an advocate for Elastic, and Elastic was a much smaller company then. It grew, and then you switch your role into a head of developer advocacy or relations. How did that change your day to day? Like, being a manager of humans versus just being the individual contributor. How is it different?
I mean, it was I want to say it was a phase transition. So the change really happened shortly after COVID started. And then we had some time to think and redo things. I mean, we switched a lot of the in-person stuff to virtual, but it was not quite the same. And then we had enough people or a big enough structure that we started a different teams. So like I at first led the European, or EMEA as we call it, team. And that still gave me like 50% management time and 50% time to do my IC work. And then after some time later, I took over the global team. Now I will always jokingly say that I do 80% management and 80% IC work. Or at least I'm trying. But I think it's important to lead by example and also know what you're doing so you can actually lead. Otherwise, you're kind of like just being pulled around. But yeah, we have a large DevRel team. My team is like around 20 people or so. As always, we're hiring. So it does keep me quite busy, or you need to carefully balance. It's like, where do you go deep and what do you do yourself and what do you let others do? Because otherwise you're going to kill yourself or not keep up.
Yeah. And as somebody who's always driven by curiosity and growth, like what's next for you? Like, what are you looking to grow? How are you looking to grow? Like, what's exciting for you?
I mean, I think I'm always motivated by the product or like what tech is doing. I feel like LLMs are a fundamental change, like how we do things. Or I feel like a year ago, people were like, well, maybe this entire AI thing is a hype. And I feel like that has slightly tilted, that people are, especially for coding right now, are very excited that it does actually work very well for many things. Developers are also not going away. They are still needed. It's just like the task is changing. Like the probably writing code is going the way of like punching cards from the early days.
Yeah.
The way to do it is just changing, but we're just getting started with the amount of software that we can suddenly create and maintain and manage. Will just shift so many things. So I think there is like this entire excitement. That is what I feel mostly motivated. I feel like if you manage or what you do specifically, that changes over time. I like solving problems. That's one of the answers that Shai, who created Elasticsearch, he was once asked, like at first, he started on his own. He wrote all the code and he did everything. And then he kept transitioning and he became the CTO and the CEO. And now he's the CTO again. And he was once asked, like, so you're not writing any code anymore. Like, how bad is that? Or is that a problem for you because you wrote so much code? And he's like, well, at first the problem was code and I just like problem solving. So the problem to solve was writing the code. And then the problem to solve was something else. And I think that's a good answer. I like that one, that you need to figure out what is the problem to solve right now and then work through that. And I feel like the rest will follow almost. Like you need to keep finding the right problems and solve the problems. And that's how things evolve. And that's what keeps me excited.
Got it. And so if you kind of look at developer relations or educating engineers, I guess, what is staying the same and what is becoming different with LLMs? Like how is that space of teaching people how to use tech changing?
I mean, I think many people have seen like the downfall of Stack Overflow, where it looks almost like a bell curve, that it started at 0 posts or questions asked, and then it kind of like went all the way up. And then there was a little peak at the start of COVID. And then since then, like it just kept dropping and dropping and dropping. And I think they're almost at 0 questions again at this point. Like it really reduced in an insanely drastic way. So I think we just need to accept that this is changing. A lot of old developers like us still have a fond spot for Stack Overflow, and I think it still has a lot of value in like training LLMs. But the intuition now is, why should I go to Stack Overflow? Potentially get yelled at why I asked in the wrong place, or a bad question, or something that has been answered before, because Stack Overflow has sometimes been a bit harsh, I want to say, in that regard. I would rather go to an LLM. I can ask it any stupid question that I want. It will not judge me. It might make a mistake, and then it's like, oh yeah, you're completely right, which is a bit annoying. So you need to be critical and still keep asking. But why would I go somewhere and ask and wait for 24 hours for a human to maybe answer, rather than going to an LLM that will answer right away? So I think the way how to ask questions, how to discover things are fundamentally shifting, and we need to change with that. It's also like, for comparisons, like oftentimes like you just go to an LLM now and just play around and say like, hey, I want to do this, give me some interesting options. And then maybe you have some opinions or thoughts about it, and then you might just kind of like go back and forth with the LLM. But like the entire discovery, problem solving and everything has very much changed. And while it's not the only thing, like making sure you show up in the right way in LLMs is an important thing. And the one thing where I'm slightly cautious is like, I love good content. Like I know that to feed LLMs, like a lot of content is generated. And I think there is no way around that. And that definitely has its place. I just think we need to find kind of like the right way that good content with human supervision, at least, or from scratch, we can argue about that, needs to be somewhere where humans can consume it. Maybe it's okay to generate a lot of content for LLMs to consume and then reuse. But I hate drowning in bad LLM content, because it's like very soul sucking for humans. Or the one thing that I don't love in interactions, like when you have like all these bots trying to answer, because it really drowns out the humans almost, or it kills the vibe for the humans. So I think we need to find a sustainable way, the human way, supported by LLMs, and also like training and making LLMs kind of like support it the right way. But there's a fundamental shift of like how we interact and how we consume, and we just need to find the right ways of like how to keep the human side human, while still supporting with LLMs.
Got it. And obviously that's going to get better and better, and we're enabling LLMs to kind of be a part of that kind of educational tool in the toolbox that we have to teach people. One of the questions I have is about how they say sometimes people want to learn how to fish, and sometimes they just want the fish, right? And to me, LLMs and agents and so forth, they're amazing for just give me the fish. Like I don't need to learn. Like I'm just trying to solve a problem. Like I don't need to understand why it works. Like I just want the solution, right? And they seem to be great at that. But then there's also this like, hey, conceptually, like let's teach things, and that's what I'm kind of wondering how much our jobs as educators of technical people are shifting more toward conceptual, teaching people how to fish versus just giving them fish.
For sure. I feel like I mean, it's a conceptual shift of like the skills that you need, and like you need to become much better at asking the right questions or finding like the areas where it will fail or the edges that you need to watch out for. Um, it's really almost a different skill. Maybe one way to compare it, like I feel like my grandparents back in the day, like if you navigated a city, you had to know, like they knew street names. When I grew up, there were phones. I don't know street names anymore. I know places, or I know how to find stuff, but I don't know from the top of my head where every street is anymore. So it shifted from like knowing to kind of like being able to find it. And I feel like that's another shift that we have almost, that is like, rather than knowing everything, you still need to be able to ask the right questions. That there's always this topic of like having good taste or figuring out if something is in good taste or not. But I think that is a skill that we also need to keep developing, is like from asking the right questions to guiding the right way and getting to the right end result. But the way just changed, rather than knowing everything from the top of your head, to just working with systems to get there. It's like, my grandparents just knew everything. I don't know, but I can still operate probably better than them because I have the right tools. You just need to use the tools the right way.
Got it. Got it. So what are you most excited about in the industry? Like, what's on the horizon that you're looking at that's going to be a game changer?
I mean, one thing that especially for DevRel, we love doing prototypes. I think LLMs are amazing at building prototypes. You can suddenly just do stuff that would take forever before. It's also like solving a lot of the annoying little things. It's like, oh, I have some configuration problem, some deployment, I don't know, how do I do this, debug that. Like you're just so much faster in doing things and making them happen. I think that is really exciting. I think there is a bit of a discussion right now with LLMs of like, oh, you don't need to read the code anymore. The LLM just generates, and there's like the ephemeral part. You just need to say what needs to happen, and then the code is the replaceable part. Other people, maybe who work on more serious systems or more critical systems, are very much like, you still need to know most of the code and you need to know all the details of what is happening. I think there are these two different views, and we'll see how that plays out in the long run. But at least for the prototyping, for a while now, we were suddenly able to do things that we were just not able to do easily before.
So rapid prototyping, much faster, sort of creating those demos and things like that, and trying it out.
One example that I have here in our office, like we have a fancy coffee machine that is fully IoT enabled. Basically, it's like it's called Decent Espresso. So it has a tablet built in, and it has all the metadata or time series data for your coffee that you make in it. And it has a plugin which only speaks Tickle or TCL, a programming language I've never done. I've written an OpenTelemetry plugin to get all of the data out of the coffee machine with OpenTelemetry from Tickle, and send it to our software, so I have full observability of our coffees. I didn't have to learn Tickle or the syntax. I still don't really understand all the language constructs or how to do things the right way. Like JSON parsing is super weird there. But the LLM just did everything. Even obscure programming languages like Tickle, it can do really well. And I could just do that. And it took me a day or two maybe to make this fully functioning thing, and then have a dashboard and see every time a coffee is made, and like the temperature, the pressure, the water flow of every single coffee, like how much water is left in the machine. Somebody cleaned the machine in the evening. Like I see everything, and we bring it to events, and it's a great toy there. But it would have taken me much, much longer before to do all of that. It would probably still have been possible, but it would have been a much bigger investment. And now we can just do things. So I think this is like, for developer relations, this is great that you can just suddenly do things that were hard before.
Got it. And then the question obviously becomes, so it's an abstraction level, right? And this is like, as humans, we constantly, that's how humanity becomes better, by abstracting things. Like a baby doesn't need to learn everything that's like, we packaged through generations. So this is an example of that, where you no longer need to learn Tickle. You're now operating at a higher level, where you're basically asking LLM to write some Tickle code for you, and so it's a level of abstraction. So then the question is, for technical folks, what is that next big skill? So it's not it's no longer about learning some primitive languages, right? But it is something else. And I think you mentioned it earlier. It's about asking the right question and kind of like prompt engineering, I guess. How do you view that?
Yeah, I think you need to figure out like, this is the end goal that I want to reach. Like, how do I get to that? How do I structure this? It's like when I got the coffee machine, it wasn't completely obvious that we would use open telemetry and how to get the data out exactly and everything. That is more like you need to form the thought and then start going the right way. But it's much more about like going the right way and like asking the right questions along the way rather than doing every single step like writing the code. I think that's just changing. And I'm sure somebody will still need to know Tickle well enough to have proper Tickle knowledge if it's mission critical. But for my coffee machine, if some stat is slightly wrong, it's probably not mission critical. So I think there I'm fine. I think the abstraction levels we'll need to figure out like what are the right abstraction levels for what system and how far do we need to go. But especially for DevRel, it just opens a lot of new doors because I don't care about some failures. I mostly need to go fast.
Got it. That makes sense. And that's why I think we're seeing such a productivity boost across the industry, right? Like all the engineers are all of a sudden like way more productive because of the new tooling and stuff. So um, it's been a huge shift. So looking at your career, like walking down the memory lane, you started as a developer, got super curious about learning, started a whole bunch of meetups and conferences, fell into being an advocate, and then fell into one of the coolest open source companies out there, Elastic, right? And essentially now you run the team of advocates, pretty sizable team, and you're kind of like on the cutting edge of like where the tech is going. So looking back, what would be a piece of advice you would have given to your younger self?
I mean, like I think I alluded to that already. Is like I was never big on planning. Maybe this works for others. For me, it's more like going with the flow almost to some degree. It's like you need to find the opportunities as they present themselves and then take them and run with them. That's at least my approach. Maybe that's just like the way my brain works or what motivates me, but just like running with that. And I guess the curiosity and keeping going, that's the one thing. And especially in times that seem very uncertain or changing very quickly, I think with LLMs, it's very hard to predict like in 3 years, this will be the career path or this will be exactly the skill that you need. I think you just need to keep up that flexibility to some degree and keep moving. That's the important part.
Got it. So be curious, be flexible, notice opportunities, and just go explore.
Yeah, I mean, so since I've been at Elastic so long, the one thing that I keep saying is like the only constant is change. Like we had a lot of org changes, we had different structures, we had different managers. Like uh, you need to just adjust to the changes. I think the one thing that has proven to be problematic is if you're static and like the rest of the organization moves and changes, and then you're left behind kind of like on your own. Like you need to keep adjusting with that. That is, I think, one of the things that you will need to do or have. Otherwise, it will just not align or you will be kind of like separated from the rest. Or you decide like this change is not the right one for you anymore. But that only leaves you like with finding some other place or some other work or another team. But I think you need to just adjust with the situation. And for better or worse, LLM probably provide a lot of opportunities for that change now.
Got it. So being nimble and adaptable, I guess.
I think adaptability, especially in the face of uncertainty, is an important skill. It's very hard to train for what is coming next or know exactly, but you just need to pick it up and go the next step, whatever the next step is.
Got it. Makes sense. Well, Philipp, thank you so much. This was I got a lot out of your story. Thank you for sharing, and such an interesting journey. And I'm looking forward to what you create next.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Great to have you.
That's it for this episode of the Intelligence Amplifiers. If you like what you've heard, be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss out on the future episodes.
And if you're interested in being a guest or have a question, check out the episode description for how to reach us. Also, don't forget to check out Plus Plus, the platform that makes collective intelligence at scale possible. Find out more at plusplus.co. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep amplifying.